Like a lot of people, I too had a very eventful 2022. So let's talk about it. But first, let's talk about what I'm doing in this video. In the background, I am just making color palettes from images I found on Pinterest in Procreate. So I just found colorful images that I liked, downloaded them, brought them into Procreate, and color picked around them to make color palettes. It's pretty simple. You can make quite a few, and I think it's just like almost therapeutic. It's just relaxing, something I like to do even if I never use color palettes. Okay, but let's get into the year of 2022 and how my life has changed forever. We'll start in January. In January at my job, I got offered a management position, and I was pretty skeptical. I didn't really want to do it, but everybody in my life was telling me I should at least give it a shot, give it a try. You've never done management before. I had been with the company for 4 years right about in January, so I ended up taking it, and I won't lie, that was pretty stressful. My position before I got promoted was a stalker. So I worked in retail, I stocked shelves, I worked early morning shifts, I left after the store had only been open for 30 minutes. I didn't deal with customers very often, and I really liked that. It was convenient. I don't like dealing with people. A lot of artists don't, so it worked really well for me. And the management position is the exact opposite of that. I'm also pretty non-confrontational, so I don't know what I was thinking when I said yes to doing management, because half of being a manager is just being confrontational. And besides that, a lot of the things that you needed to know to be a manager, I had never learned. So I literally only ever stocked the shelves. I did inventory and stuff like that, but I had never really ventured too far outside of doing stock related projects in the store. It made sense why they wanted me to move up to management though. For the past few years in the position I held, I had been in a bit of a team lead role, so I had been there the longest. We had a pretty high turnover rate for our team of stalkers, so I had been there the longest, actually 4 years. I got hired in January. I got promoted in January. I really think it ended up being like a promotion of convenience because I was already with the company and I had worked there for so long and already was in a bit of a team lead role. So it just made the most sense for my boss at the time to promote me instead of looking outside of our store for a replacement manager. This really meant that I wasn't the best fit for it, but I was the quickest and easiest route to getting a manager fast in our store. So I was like trained and back in our store in a record turnaround time. Like less than 2 weeks after being offered the job, I was the manager for my team. And all of this was pretty stressful because I never really wanted to be a manager. I always said that if I was offered management, I wouldn't take it. But because I felt like it was necessary and I didn't really have a choice, I took it. And with that, we end January with me accepting a promotion that I didn't really want and moving into February, where the first week I have management training across town. And literal days before I start my training, I find out I am pregnant. I have literally never been so scared, nervous, and stressed out in my entire life than I was that first week of February. From here, I think we should talk a little bit about things that scare me and make me anxious in life, and new things is one of them. Being a manager is new to me. Being pregnant is new to me. Having my life change 100% in the span of a week was all very new and very scary for me, especially because I don't do well with change either. But it was important for me to remember that just because it was new and it was a change didn't mean that it was a bad thing, and it really wasn't. both the promotion and the pregnancy were, at the end of the day, a good thing. I will say it was really, really hard to focus on training while all I could think about was that I was pregnant and oh my gosh, what was I gonna do? And oh my gosh, this management training is so hard. There's so much to learn. And I was very thankful that I only had to do the management training across town for 3 days instead of the usual week. So thus ends my saga of management training and pregnancy fear. I am back in my home store after those 3 days and I am officially a manager. So I am like settling into this new role at my job and I am coming to terms with being pregnant. All is good, except for the fact that I could not go more than like an hour and a half without running to the bathroom because I felt sick. I was like sick to my stomach in more than one way my entire first trimester. And I'm trying to be like so low key about not feeling good and going to the bathroom, but nothing is more suspicious than like sneaking to the bathroom a bunch during your work shift. So a lot of people were starting to like guess and like I kind of start rumors about like why I was going to the bathroom so much. I even had one coworker ask another manager what was up with me, like if they knew what was wrong with me because I was going to the restroom so much. And at that point, nobody knew. I hadn't told anybody, and I didn't plan on telling anybody until I was firmly in my second trimester at work. I will go ahead and say here, like, I got pretty lucky. I had a fairly easy pregnancy. Like, for the most part, my symptoms were just, like, all-day nausea and, you know, a little TMI. But during that first trimester, I had, like, severe diarrhea pretty much every day. And then, like, during the second trimester, we flipped that coin right around. And instead of, you know, going to the bathroom all the time, I, like, couldn't go at all because I was so constipated. But those were, like, my biggest, most, like, inconvenient symptoms I had. But I will get into, like, one other symptom that I had that made it really, really hard for me to do my job in just a few minutes. But first, we're going to jump ahead in time a little bit. So first trimester is done. I've gone to all of my doctor's appointments like I'm supposed to. I've had my ultrasounds. And I did the genetic testing that lets you know early if you want the gender of your baby. So I found out at, I guess it was about like 10 weeks pregnant that I was going to be having a little boy. And I, for one, am not very big on parties or anything, and I've always thought that gender reveal parties are kind of dumb. That's beside the point. So I did not want to have a gender reveal party. I just did a little gender reveal for my mom and dad and for my partner. So for my mom and dad, I put this little blue rubber ducky in a box with pink and blue shredded paper and covered the duck with it and gave it to them so that they could open it up and pull out the little ducky that was blue so that they knew I was having a little boy. And for my partner, I did something similar, but instead of a little blue ducky, I put a little pair of blue shark shoes, like infant shoes in a box and had him open that. And he was really excited because he wanted to have a little boy. Back to what I was saying about moving into the second trimester. So I'm, give or take a couple weeks, like 14 weeks pregnant, and I decide, okay, I cannot hide it anymore. I have to tell my boss and one of the other managers in my store that I am pregnant. Like, they need to know. It's getting harder for me to hide. Not that I was getting very big at this point, but I was definitely experiencing a few more symptoms, and it was just time for them to know, especially because I was going to doctor's appointments more frequently. So I let them know, and they are like 100% supportive, which was great because I was really afraid that I was going to tell them and they were going to be like disappointed in me, which is crazy. But I do have a bit of a fear of disappointing people in my life, especially people that I look up to and respect, which I definitely respected my boss a lot and this other manager a whole lot. So, fear of disappointing them, it was very overpowering. But let's circle back to that other symptom I had mentioned before that made it hard to do my job sometimes. Sometime in the second trimester, early on, I started experiencing some pretty bad hip pain and lower back pain that I thought was like sciatica, but it wasn't. But I thought it was sciatica or like sciatic nerve pain because I would like take a step and then I would have a shooting pain down my leg and my knee would give out on that leg. So every now and then I would like almost fall to the ground because my leg would give out from this shooting pain from my hip and lower back. I would sometimes get this before I was pregnant, but not nearly as often as when I was. And as I got further along, it got worse and happened more frequently. So it really started interfering with my ability to like walk around the store all day. Obviously, if I'm like almost falling on my face every so often because my leg gives out from pain, that was really cool. It meant that I was having to take a few steps back as manager and really putting more on my employees because I couldn't do everything that I used to be able to because I was getting more and more pregnant and things were getting harder and harder to do, especially with this annoying symptom. And for the most part, that was like the worst of the second trimester for me. And for like my job. I did end up telling the rest of my coworkers a few weeks after telling my bosses that I was pregnant, and a lot of them were surprised. They like had no idea. And I only told like my immediate coworkers or people immediately under me. I didn't really tell a whole bunch of people in the store. So there were some people who didn't even know I was pregnant until like way later, which is kind of funny. It's because I wore like these giant baggy t-shirts to work every day. So I was comfortable, but it also meant that like any baby bump I was having, you like couldn't really see unless you were looking closely. I mean, there were a few people that I worked with almost every other day, and they didn't know until I was like a week away from taking FMLA leave, which is just so funny to me. It's like I'm hobbling around the store by that point and they still hadn't like caught on, and I guess nobody had mentioned it to them. Speaking of FMLA leave, I will tell you guys right now that that was the most frustrating thing ever to try and get approved. Like, if you have never tried to apply for FMLA or short-term disability, it is like so annoying and so frustrating because they want you to like prove a bunch of stuff and like have a really good reason for it, obviously, which is fine, but it was just like a huge pain in the butt. Most people take their leave starting like maybe the week they're supposed to give birth or whatever, or like right around the time they're supposed to give birth. I opted to take mine starting about 2 months early because it was just getting so difficult for me to perform my job, and there wasn't really a way for me to get around having to walk so much, and it was like I physically could not do it. So that was another reason why I was having such a hard time getting approved for leave, which I will say this is probably like such an American problem. Like, oh, I couldn't get maternity leave because of X, Y, and Z. But yeah, I also like didn't have paid maternity leave or FMLA leave. I had to use my short-term disability insurance, and I only got paid for the 5 weeks I was on leave after I gave birth. I was not approved for short-term disability for the 2 months I couldn't physically walk or, do half of the things I needed to do for my job, which was fine. It wasn't like a huge deal or anything, but I feel like it is definitely like a uniquely American experience that I had to deal with. So because I took leave early, the last like few months of my pregnancy weren't particularly eventful. I mostly hung out around the house and prepared for my baby to arrive. This required doing a lot of rearranging of my room because I live at my parents' house still. And luckily, my room in this house is big enough for me and my partner and our baby. But I had to do a lot of rearranging to make that work. And to be honest, I'm a procrastinator at heart, so I definitely waited a little too long to start this rearranging process. So I am like 37 weeks pregnant, and I'm like, okay, we have got to get this done. So I start moving stuff around in my room, moving the furniture around. Luckily, we have carpet, and most of my furniture is either very light or was on these little like carpet sliders, furniture sliders that make it easy to just kind of push stuff around. And I had my sister help with a few things that were just too heavy for me to move by myself. But so I do all of this shifting and rearranging of the room and get everything pretty much situated. The only thing I needed to put in here at that point was like a crib and the bassinet and like the rest of the baby stuff. I had like the changing table / dresser in here already. I just needed like where the baby was going to sleep to be brought in. And literally the next day after I rearranged my room, I wake up and it's 4 a.m. and I am like cramping so bad. And I think to myself, yeah, I think I'm having contractions, and they were pretty bad. Like, they weren't terrible. I was doing okay, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna take a hot shower, just to help ease it a little bit, because they're not that bad. I can still like stand and walk and do all this stuff when they're happening. It's not like a big deal. And then I take the shower. I'm like in the shower when my partner gets up to get ready for work, and he asks if I'm okay, and I tell him, yeah, I just think I started having contractions. I think I'm going into labor. And he said, okay, do you want me to stay home from work? And I told him, no, go to work, because I don't think I will be actually having this baby anytime soon, and I'm definitely not going to the hospital soon because my contractions were still really far apart. So he goes to work and I stay home, and I end up going downstairs and just kind of hanging out on my couch with a heating pad, and every so often for the next 12 hours pretty much taking a hot shower to try and help with the contractions. By like 5 p.m., my contractions were getting really bad and I was like shaking from the pain. So I was like, okay, now it is time to go to the hospital. I did not want to go to the hospital before that because I didn't want to be an inconvenience, and I didn't want to go in just to be told to go home because I wasn't far enough along. And all that waiting paid off because I was 4.5 centimeters dilated when I got to the hospital, and they took me back to a room right away so that I could continue, contracting and stuff at the hospital. And I did, in fact, get an epidural like as soon as possible because I was not tolerating the pain very well anymore. My partner met us at the hospital after he got off work, and my mom took me to the hospital, so she was there as well. And within the next day, I gave birth to my little boy. I will just put it in here that there is a lot about the childbirthing process that I did not know about and people don't really talk about, that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, and neither was my partner. So a few things that happened were maybe like a little traumatizing, but at the end of the day, we had a happy and healthy baby boy, and that was all that mattered. The first few weeks postpartum were really rough. I'm not even going to pretend like they weren't. There were a lot of tears and there was a lot of adjustment to be had. You know, it is a really big change having a baby, especially one that we weren't necessarily like planning for. So we had a lot to come to terms with, which, you know, even if you are planning to have a kid, it is like a shock to the system when they are like actually here. So the first few weeks we had, you know, a little bit of an adjustment period, but everybody is, you know, really happy and really grateful now for our son, and we love him so much. I never thought that I would be so invested in like being a mom and like raising a kid as I am now. I always thought that I would have kids one day, but I didn't think it would be this early on in my life, because I was 23 when I got pregnant and I turned 24 right after having him. My son was born a week before my birthday. It was actually kind of perfect because he was supposed to be due a few days after my birthday, but he ended up coming a week early. So it all worked out in the end, and we're just so happy to have him and start our little family together. It has been so amazing and cool to watch my little bean grow over the past few months, and, you know, throughout my entire pregnancy, seeing him grow from literally a little bean all the way into the 13-pound 3-month-old he is now. It's just absolutely mind-blowing, and I am so grateful that he's healthy and we have just this amazing little family together. I did decide after he was born pretty quickly that I definitely was not going to be going back to my job. So I put in my 2 weeks notice while I was still on leave, which was really funny because my boss, when I showed up and gave it to him, he was like, "You're not even back at work yet. How can you turn in a 2 weeks notice if you're not even working?" Yeah, so I didn't go back to work. For the next few months, I'm probably going to just spend time with my baby, make sure he's getting everything he needs and is growing well, and then I will, you know, look into getting a part-time job again. But for now, I want to spend this time with my baby, and I think it's really important for me to do that. And my partner has made it so that I can. And I am just so grateful for everything my partner has done throughout this entire journey. I mean, for this entire year, he has been so supportive and so kind and loving, and I am just so grateful for him. I'm also very thankful for our families who were so supportive and caring throughout the entire time as well. So that was my 2022. I became a mom. I quit my job after getting a promotion, and I couldn't be happier. I hope you guys had a good 2022 as well. I know it's been rough the past few years, so here's to 2023 being even better. All right, bye.